The phone rang at exactly 4:03 p.m. on what should have been the best Tuesday of my retirement. I was sitting in my garage workshop in Detroit, finally having time to rebuild the 1967 Mustang I'd bought 30 years ago but never had time to touch. 40 years at Ford Motor Company, and this was supposed to be my reward. Time to work with my hands on something I actually wanted to build. I saw Patricia's name on the caller ID and almost didn't answer. When my daughter-in-law called, it was never good news. "Wesley," she said without even a hello. Never called me Dad, never called me Grandpa, just Wesley, like I was some stranger. "I have an incredible opportunity in Las Vegas, a social media influencer conference that's going to change our lives completely." Here we go again. Another one of her get-rich-quick schemes where she'd blow money we didn't have on dreams that never materialized. "The problem is," she continued, "the kids can't miss 2 weeks of school, so I'm dropping them off with you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I set down my wrench. "I'm sorry, what?" "Don't play dumb, Wesley. I said I'm leaving Marshall, Margaret, and Spencer with you for 2 weeks. After all, you don't do anything anymore, so you can watch them while I travel. It's perfect timing. Now that you're not working, you have all the time in the world." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I don't do anything anymore. This woman who had never worked an honest day in her life, who lived off my son like a parasite, was telling me that 40 years of building engines and raising a family alone meant I did nothing. "Patricia, I have plans." She laughed that sharp, cutting laugh I'd grown to despise. "Plans? What plans can a retired old man possibly have? Watching TV? Taking naps?" "Please, Wesley, don't be ridiculous." My blood pressure spiked. I looked around my workshop, the same garage where I'd taught my son Preston how to change oil when he was 8, where I'd rebuilt dozens of engines to make extra money when times were tight, where I'd spent countless nights fixing neighbors' cars to put food on the table after my wife Dorothy died. "I'll drop them off at 7 a.m. sharp," Patricia continued. "And don't feed them junk food like last time. Their systems are very sensitive. Last time? The last time I'd seen my grandchildren was 6 months ago at Christmas, and only for 2 hours because according to Patricia, they had to visit the important grandparents, her parents, the ones with money." "I'm not watching them, Patricia." "What do you mean you're not?" Her voice turned ice cold. "You're their grandfather. It's your obligation. Besides, Preston already agreed to this." That was a lie. My son worked 12-hour shifts at the GM plant and barely had time to breathe, let alone plan his children's care 2 weeks in advance. Patricia was playing her usual game, manipulation through false authority. "If you ever want to see your grandchildren again," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than screaming, "you'd better cooperate, because I decide if they have a grandfather or not." And that's when something inside me snapped, not broke, snapped. Like a steel cable under too much tension finally reaching its breaking point. For 10 years, I'd endured this woman's contempt. 10 years of being treated like a free service whenever she needed something, then being discarded when I wasn't useful. 10 years of watching her systematically erase me from my grandchildren's lives while bleeding my son dry financially and emotionally. But this threat, this casual announcement that she controlled access to my own family, crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In that moment, holding the phone with hands that had built engines for 4 decades, I made the most important decision of my 68 years. I was going to teach Patricia Parker a lesson she would never forget. "All right, Patricia," I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "bring them over tomorrow. That's more like it. And Wesley, don't spoil them. You know they're difficult children, but that's because you never knew how to raise Preston properly. If he'd had a decent father figure instead of—" I hung up before she could finish. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage that had been building for a decade. I sat there in my garage, surrounded by tools that had built a lifetime of solutions to complex problems. The retirement certificate on my workbench caught my eye. 40 years of loyal service to Ford Motor Company. 40 years of never missing a deadline, never leaving a job half-finished, never backing down when the engineering got tough. And my own daughter-in-law treated me like a broken-down piece of machinery, only useful when she needed free labor. But if Patricia thought she was dealing with some helpless old man, she was about to learn the difference between retirement and obsolescence. My name is Wesley Parker, and I just declared war. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Roger?" "Yeah, it's Wesley Parker. I need your help." Roger Wilson had been my neighbor for 15 years before he retired from Detroit PD. We'd shared beers on summer evenings, watched Lions games together, complained about our lawns. But more importantly, Roger had worked security consulting after his police retirement, specializing in surveillance equipment for divorce cases. "You remember what you told me about those recording devices you used in your private security work?" I asked. "Sure do. What's going on, Wes? My daughter-in-law just declared war on my family. I need to document everything that's about to happen." Roger was quiet for a moment. "How serious is this?" "Serious enough that I think she's planning to take my grandchildren away permanently. I need evidence. I'll be over in an hour with everything you need. And Wesley? My sister Sharon still works at Child Protective Services. Might want to give her a heads up about potential issues." "Perfect." I hung up and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff Dorothy had bought me for our 20th anniversary, still sitting on the shelf 15 years after her death. If I was going to war, I needed to think clearly about what I was up against. Patricia hadn't appeared overnight. She'd been systematically destroying my family for a decade, and I'd let it happen because I thought keeping peace was more important than fighting back. That had been my mistake. It started when Preston was in his junior year at Michigan State, studying mechanical engineering just like his old man. He brought her home one Sunday after we'd watched the Lions lose another game. "Dad, I want you to meet someone special," he'd said. There she was, 21 years old, gorgeous in that magazine-perfect way, wearing a dress that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. She hugged me with warmth that completely disarmed me. "Oh, Mr. Parker, Preston has told me so much about you. I admire you so much, raising such a wonderful son all by yourself after losing your wife. You're my hero." Hero. When was the last time anyone had called me that? When was the last time anyone had acknowledged what I'd sacrificed to raise Preston alone after Dorothy's cancer took her when he was just 5 years old? I fell for it completely. The first few years were good, I won't lie. Patricia would visit, help with holiday dinners, talk about her humble family from small-town Kentucky. Her father was a mechanic, her mother worked retail. "That's why I understand you so much, Mr. Parker. You and I know what it's like to work hard for everything." All lies, as I found out later. But I was so happy to see Preston in love that I ignored the red flags. They married when Preston graduated. I paid for half the wedding with money I'd saved for my own retirement, calling it an investment in my son's happiness. Patricia cried during the ceremony, beautiful tears that I thought were joy. Now I know they were disappointment that the wedding wasn't more expensive. The change was gradual, like rust eating through steel. First came the subtle comments. "Oh, Wesley, what a shame Preston didn't have more guidance growing up. You can see it in his lack of ambition. If you'd managed money better, Preston could have gone to a private university. No offense, but your cooking is very basic. I make meals with more sophisticated flavors." Each comment was designed to chip away at my confidence, my relationship with my son, my place in the family, but I endured them because I thought that's what families did. They endured each other's flaws for the greater good. When Marshall was born, my first grandson, I thought everything would change for the better. I rushed to the hospital with a wooden toy chest I'd spent 3 months building by hand in my garage. Every joint perfect, every surface smooth as silk, finished with 6 coats of polyurethane. Patricia looked at it and pushed it aside. "Thanks, but we already have everything from Pottery Barn Kids. This? Well, maybe we can donate it somewhere." Pottery Barn Kids. While I was shopping at secondhand stores to save money for my son's family, she was buying designer everything with Preston's paycheck from the plant. That toy chest ended up in my garage, where it still sits today. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at it and wondering where I'd gone wrong. Then came Margaret, and 3 years later, Spencer. With each grandchild, I found myself further pushed to the margins of their lives. Patricia had 1,000 excuses why I couldn't see them. The children needed routine. I would spoil them. My house wasn't safe. My ideas about child rearing were outdated. "You just don't understand modern parenting, Wesley," she'd tell me. "Kids today need structured enrichment, coding classes, Mandarin lessons, competitive soccer, not just garage time and bologna sandwiches like Preston grew up with. Garage time and bologna sandwiches." My son had grown up with love, with values, with the absolute certainty that his father would move heaven and earth to protect him. But Patricia had rewritten that history, turning my sacrifices into failures, my love into inadequacy. Now sitting in that same garage with bourbon burning my throat, I realized I'd been fighting the wrong battle for 10 years. I'd been fighting to keep peace when I should have been fighting to protect my family. Roger arrived an hour later with a leather briefcase that looked like it belonged to an insurance salesman. Inside were devices that would make a spy jealous, recording units the size of shirt buttons, cameras that looked like smoke detectors, Audio equipment so small you could hide it in a sugar bowl. "This is military-grade stuff," Roger explained, setting up the equipment on my workbench. "I use it for corporate espionage cases now. Battery life of 72 hours, memory for 200 hours of footage. If your daughter-in-law is planning something, we'll catch every word." What about the legal side? Michigan is a one-party consent state. As long as you're present during recordings in your own home, everything's admissible in court. And speaking of court, Roger pulled out a manila envelope. "I did some digging on your daughter-in-law. Wesley, she's got credit cards in Preston's name totaling $45,000, all opened in the last 18 months. My stomach dropped. Preston doesn't know? Based on the spending patterns, I'd say no. Las Vegas charges, Miami, Cancun. This isn't business travel. This is someone living a double life. I studied the credit reports. My son, who'd inherited my work ethic and lived modestly his entire life, was apparently financing luxury vacations he'd never taken to places he'd never been. "There's more," Roger continued. "Property records show a house purchased in Las Vegas 6 months ago. Buyer listed as Duncan Ross, but the down payment, it came from an account with Patricia's name on it. Duncan Ross. I'd never heard that name before, but something told me I was about to learn a lot more about Mr. Ross very soon. After Roger left, I sat alone in my garage until well past midnight, planning. In 40 years of engineering, I'd learned that the most complex problems required systematic solutions. You don't fix a blown engine by randomly replacing parts. You diagnose methodically, document everything, then execute repairs in the correct sequence. Patricia thought she was dealing with a lonely old man she could manipulate and discard. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with someone who'd spent 4 decades solving problems under pressure. I made coffee at 5 a.m. and reviewed my strategy. First, I'd document everything, every interaction, every conversation, every behavior pattern. Second, I'd win over the children by showing them what family actually meant. Third, I'd gather enough evidence to protect them legally when Patricia returned. Most importantly, I'd teach those kids that love wasn't something you begged for or traded for good behavior. Real love was earned through consistency, respect, and genuine care. At exactly 7 a.m., Patricia's black SUV pulled into my driveway. I watched through this kitchen window as she got out, checking her phone while 3 small figures slowly emerged from the vehicle like prisoners being transferred. Marshall, 12 years old, tall for his age but slouching like he was trying to disappear. Margaret, 10, with her mother's dark hair but none of her warmth. Spencer, 7, clutching a tablet like a life preserver. I opened the front door before Patricia could ring the bell. "I don't have time to chat," she announced, not even stepping inside. She was dressed like she was going to a photo shoot, not dropping off children. "Marshall is allergic to dust. Margaret won't eat anything with green vegetables. Spencer needs his tablet to sleep. Their medications are in the blue suitcase. And Preston? Isn't he coming to say goodbye?" "Preston is working, as always. Someone has to support this family." She looked me up and down with barely concealed disgust. "Not all of us are lucky enough to retire with a pension. My pension, $2,800 a month after 40 years of service." Patricia spent more than that on her monthly shopping trips to Somerset Collection. The children entered my house dragging oversized suitcases, their faces showing all the enthusiasm of defendants entering a courtroom. I noticed Marshall's phone was glued to his hand. Margaret was already scowling at my furniture, and Spencer was looking around like he'd been abandoned in a foreign country. "Be good for your grandfather," Patricia said without any warmth or conviction. Then she leaned close to me and whispered, "And don't you dare fill their heads with ideas about how things used to be. Remember, I decide if they ever see you again after this." She walked away without hugging her children goodbye. Not a kiss on the forehead, not even a wave from the car window. Just the sound of her heels clicking on my driveway and the SUV engine fading into the distance. I stood there with 3 children who looked at me like I was the enemy. These weren't the grandchildren I'd imagined getting to know. These were strangers who'd been programmed to see me as the boring grandfather, the poor grandfather, the grandfather who wasn't worth their time. But I'd raised one child from scratch after losing the love of my life, and he'd turned out to be a good man despite everything Patricia had done to him since. These 3 were about to discover what their Grandpa Wesley was actually made of. "Grandpa, where's the Wi-Fi password?" Marshall demanded before I'd even closed the front door. He was already tapping frantically on his phone screen. "I need internet right now." "The router's having problems," I lied smoothly. I'd unplugged it at 6 a.m. as part of my strategy. Might be down for a while. "What?" Marshall's voice cracked like he was announcing the apocalypse. "How am I supposed to—" "Mom said you'd have internet. This is insane. I'm hungry, Margaret interrupted, looking around my living room like she'd been dropped in a homeless shelter. But I'm not eating anything you cook. Mom says you're a terrible cook, and that's why Dad got so skinny when he lived here. Spencer had already found the television and was pressing buttons on the remote with increasing frustration. Where's Netflix? Where's Disney Plus? This TV is ancient. I want to watch YouTube. I stood there watching them, these three children who'd been raised to believe the world existed solely for their entertainment. Patricia hadn't just neglected them emotionally. She'd turned them into tiny consumers who couldn't function without constant digital stimulation and immediate gratification. But I'd seen this before. In 40 years at Ford, I'd worked with plenty of young engineers who showed up thinking they knew everything, demanding respect they hadn't earned, expecting the world to accommodate their preferences. You didn't fix that attitude by arguing with it. You fixed it by creating structure and consequences. Here's how this is going to work, I said calmly, settling into my recliner. This is my house, and in my house, we have rules. You want Wi-Fi? You earn it. You want entertainment? You earn it. You want special food? You earn it. That's not fair, Marshall shouted. We're just kids. We don't have to earn basic stuff. Your mother told you that you don't have to earn respect, didn't she? That you're entitled to whatever you want just because you exist? Yes, all three said simultaneously, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Well, your mother lied to you. In the real world, the world where your dad works 12-hour shifts to pay for everything you take for granted, nobody gets anything for free. Respect is earned. Privileges are earned. Even love has to be demonstrated through actions. I could see the recording device Roger had installed in the lamp base, capturing every word. This conversation would be important evidence later. I'm calling Mom, Spencer announced, grabbing his tablet. She'll make you give us what we want. Good luck with that. Your mom is on an airplane to Las Vegas right about now, and even if she wasn't, this is my house. She doesn't make the rules here. Margaret's face was turning red. Mom said you're mean and bitter because you're old and alone. She said that's why nobody visits you. There it was, Patricia's poison coming directly from my granddaughter's mouth. But instead of feeling hurt, I felt clarity. These children were victims of their mother's manipulation, trained to push away anyone who might actually care about them. Is that what you think? That I'm alone because nobody likes me? Yes, Marshall said defiantly. Mom says you drove everyone away because you're negative all the time. I walked over to my mantle and picked up a framed photo from last summer. Preston's plant supervisor retirement party. 23 people, including Preston and me, all laughing around a picnic table. These are my friends from work. We still get together once a month to play poker. That's Roger Wilson next to me. He was a Detroit police detective for 30 years. That's Harvey Schmidt, who managed the transmission plant for 25 years. Good men who worked hard their whole lives and know the value of loyalty. I picked up another photo. This is from the church volunteer day last spring. I help rebuild homes for senior citizens who can't afford contractors. That's me installing a new kitchen sink for Mrs. Patterson, whose husband died in Vietnam. The children were staring at the photos like they were looking at evidence of alien life. Your mother told you I'm alone and bitter because she wanted you to believe that's what happens to people who don't bow down to her demands. But look around this house, kids. Really look. I gestured toward the living room walls covered with pictures of Preston growing up. School achievement awards, sports teams, family vacations. This house is full of love, full of memories, full of a father who worked 2 jobs for 15 years to make sure his son had every opportunity to succeed. Your dad didn't get skinny because I couldn't cook. He got strong because I taught him that effort and discipline create results. Spencer was looking at a photo of Preston in his high school graduation cap and gown. Dad was skinny? Your dad was focused. He studied while other kids partied. He worked part-time jobs while other kids played video games. He earned a mechanical engineering degree from Michigan State because he understood that nothing worthwhile comes easy. But your mom says a lot of things that aren't true. Over the next 2 weeks, you're going to learn the difference between what people say and what people do. I looked at each of them in turn. So here's the deal. You can spend these 2 weeks fighting me, complaining about everything and being miserable. Or you can earn some privileges by contributing to this household like family members should. What kind of privileges? Margaret asked suspiciously. Well, that depends on what kind of effort you're willing to put in. The first breakthrough came at 2 a.m. that night. I heard crying from Margaret's room. Not the angry tantrums from earlier, but real, heartbroken sobs. I knocked softly and found her clutching a crumpled photograph. What do you have there, sweetheart? She tried to hide it under her pillow. Nothing. Go away. But I'd seen enough. It was a picture of me holding her when she was maybe 2 years old, both of us grinning at the camera. One of the few photos from before Patricia's campaign to erase me from their lives. "Do you miss your mom?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "No," she answered too quickly. "Mom's used to traveling. She goes away all the time for work. I'm used to it." "How often does she travel, Margaret?" "I don't know. Maybe once a month, sometimes more." Her voice got smaller. "She always says it's for business conferences and networking events." I thought about Roger's evidence, the credit card charges in Las Vegas, Miami, Cancun, all places Patricia had gone while telling Preston she was at local business seminars. "Margaret, can I ask you something? Does your mom ever bring work friends home, people from these conferences?" She hesitated. "We're not supposed to talk about family stuff with outsiders. The golden rule of abusers, silence. Keep the secrets in the house. I'm not an outsider, sweetheart. I'm your grandfather. And sometimes adults tell children to keep secrets that they shouldn't have to keep." That's when it came out. Slowly at first, then like a dam bursting. "There's Uncle Duncan. He's Mom's business partner. He comes over sometimes when Dad's working late shifts. Mom says he's helping her with social media marketing. Uncle Duncan. Now I had a name for the man who'd bought a house in Las Vegas with my daughter-in-law's money." "Does Uncle Duncan stay long when he visits?" "Sometimes he sleeps over. In the guest room." She paused, then whispered, "Except last time I heard him in Mom and Dad's bathroom at night, and Mom told us we weren't allowed upstairs until after he left in the morning." My stomach clenched. This 10-year-old girl had been forced to lie to protect her mother's affair. The psychological damage Patricia was inflicting went far beyond simple neglect. "Margaret, that must be confusing for you. Mom says Uncle Duncan is helping our family become successful. She says Dad doesn't understand business like Uncle Duncan does." Tears started flowing again. "But I don't like when Uncle Duncan comes over. He looks at Mom weird and she acts different. Happier but also meaner to us." I hugged her then, and she didn't pull away. For the first time in years, my granddaughter let me comfort her. "Sweetheart, grown-ups sometimes make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to protect. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix it. Are you going to tell Dad about Uncle Duncan? I'm going to make sure your dad knows everything he needs to know to keep you safe." The next morning started differently. When the children came down for breakfast, I had pancakes waiting. Not fancy ones, but hearty ones shaped like cars and tools. Real food made with ingredients I could pronounce. Spencer dove in immediately. "These are really good, Grandpa." "Shut up, Spencer," Marshall hissed. "We're not supposed to like his food." "Why not?" Spencer asked with genuine confusion. "It tastes better than the protein bars Mom gives us for breakfast." Protein bars. For 7-year-olds. While Patricia spent thousands on handbags and trips to Las Vegas. "Marshall," I said calmly, "did your mom tell you not to enjoy anything here?" He looked uncomfortable. She said you'd try to make us like you by giving us sugar and letting us do whatever we want. She said that's how bad grandparents manipulate kids. The psychological manipulation was even worse than I'd thought. Patricia hadn't just poisoned them against me. She'd taught them to distrust any kindness as manipulation. "Tell you what," I said. "After breakfast, I'm going to show you something. Then you can decide for yourselves whether I'm trying to manipulate you or actually care about you." I led them to my garage workshop. Their eyes went wide seeing the organized tools, the partially rebuilt Mustang, the workbench covered with precise mechanical drawings. "This is where I've spent 40 years solving problems. See this engine?" I patted the Mustang's hood. "When I bought this car, it was broken. Engine seized, transmission shot, body rusted through. Everyone said it wasn't worth saving." "But you fixed it?" Spencer asked. "I'm still fixing it. Been working on it for 30 years, a little bit at a time. You know why?" They shook their heads. "Because some things are worth the effort even when they seem hopeless. Even when everyone tells you to give up." I looked at each of them meaningfully. Sometimes the most broken things become the most beautiful when someone cares enough to put in the work. Marshall was running his hand along the car's fender. "Dad used to talk about this car. He said you promised to teach him how to rebuild engines, but what? But Mom said you were too busy with your own projects to spend time with family." Another lie. I'd begged Preston to bring the kids over for garage time. Patricia always had excuses why they couldn't come. "Would you like to learn how engines work?" For the first time since they'd arrived, I saw genuine interest in Marshall's eyes. Over the next 3 days, something remarkable happened in my garage. Marshall discovered he had his father's mechanical aptitude. Margaret turned out to have an artist's eye for detail when sanding rust spots. Even Spencer, too young for power tools, became the world's most organized tool manager. "Hand me the 7/16 wrench," Marshall would say, and Spencer would locate it instantly from the perfectly arranged toolbox. "The carburetor looks like a metal flower," Margaret observed while I cleaned the parts. She was right. There was beauty in functional design that she could see instinctively. But it was during one of these afternoon sessions that I made the discovery that would change everything. Marshall had left his phone on my workbench while we rebuilt the alternator. The screen lit up with a text notification, and I couldn't help but see the name. Mom, Vegas. "Marshall, your mom texted you." He grabbed the phone quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse of the message thread. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Can I see that for a second?" "No," he clutched it protectively. "It's private, son. I think your mom might be sending you messages that aren't appropriate for a 12-year-old to handle alone." Something in my voice must have convinced him because he reluctantly handed over the phone. What I found in his text history was worse than anything I'd imagined. Patricia had been using Marshall as her spy and accomplice for months. "Remember, if anyone asks about Uncle Duncan, he's just Mom's business partner. Read one message from 2 weeks ago. If Dad asks about my conferences, tell him I'm learning social media marketing for the family business. Read another. Don't let Dad see my credit card statements when they come in the mail. Hide them in my desk drawer like we practiced." But the most damaging message was from yesterday, sent while she was supposedly on her business trip, having so much fun in Vegas with Duncan. "Don't tell Dad about the photos on my Instagram. We're planning a surprise that will change everything for our family. Can't wait to start our new life." My hands were shaking as I scrolled through months of psychological manipulation. Patricia hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been grooming her own 12-year-old son to be her accomplice in destroying their family. "Marshall," I said carefully, "how long has your mom been asking you to keep secrets from your dad?" His face crumpled. "Since last summer. She said Dad gets stressed about business stuff, so it's better if we don't worry him with details. And how does it make you feel, having to keep all these secrets?" "Terrible." The words exploded out of him. "I hate lying to Dad, but Mom says if I tell him anything, he'll get so upset he might have a heart attack and die. She says it's my job to protect him by keeping quiet." The manipulation was breathtaking. Patricia had convinced a child that his father's life depended on maintaining her lies. "Marshall, your dad isn't going to have a heart attack from learning the truth. Adults don't work that way. Your mom told you that to make you feel responsible for her choices. But what if she's right? What if Dad gets sick because of me?" I set down my tools and looked at my grandson, really looked at him. This kid had been carrying the weight of his mother's deception for months, terrified that one wrong word would kill his father. "Come here, son." I pulled up the photos on my computer that Roger had given me, the credit reports, the property records, the evidence of Patricia's double life. "Your mom has been planning to leave your family for at least 6 months. She's spent $45,000 of your dad's money. She bought a house in Las Vegas with another man. None of this is your fault, and none of it is your responsibility to fix." Marshall stared at the documents. "She bought a house? With Uncle Duncan?" "Yes. And based on these texts, she's planning to take you kids there permanently." "No." Margaret had been listening from the doorway. "I don't want to live in Las Vegas. I want to stay here with you and Dad." Spencer appeared beside her. "Are we moving away, Grandpa?" I looked at these 3 children. My grandchildren, who I'd barely known a week ago, but who had already become the center of my world again. They were scared, confused, and completely innocent victims of their mother's selfish choices. Not if I have anything to say about it. That evening, after I'd made dinner and we'd eaten together like a real family for the first time in years, I called Preston at work. "Dad, is everything okay? The kids giving you trouble? Preston, I need you to come over tomorrow evening after your shift. There are some things about Patricia that you need to know." "What kind of things?" I looked at Marshall, who was doing homework at my kitchen table without being asked. At Margaret, who was sketching designs for a birdhouse we'd planned to build together. At Spencer, who was carefully arranging his crayons by color. The kind of things that are going to change everything. After I hung up, Marshall approached me quietly. "Grandpa, when you show Dad all that stuff, is Mom going to get in trouble?" "Your mom is already in trouble, son. She just doesn't know it yet. Are you going to save us?" I looked into his eyes that looked just like his father's, just like mine. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." Preston arrived the next evening at 7:15 p.m., still in his work clothes, grease under his fingernails, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. He'd been pulling double shifts for months to pay for Patricia's business expenses, expenses I now knew were funding her affair and escape plan. Dad, where are the kids? Finishing homework in the kitchen. Preston, sit down. We need to talk. He settled into Dorothy's old recliner, the one Patricia had always complained was too shabby for their living room. Is this about the house repairs? Because I can help with whatever needs fixing. It's not about repairs, son. It's about Patricia. Something in my voice made him sit up straighter. What about Patricia? I opened the folder I'd prepared and placed the first document on the coffee table between us. These are credit card statements. 3 cards opened in your name over the last 18 months. Total balance, $45,000. Preston picked up the papers with trembling hands. I don't understand. I never opened these accounts. Look at the charges, Preston. Las Vegas, Miami, Cancun, expensive hotels, restaurants, shopping. While you've been working 60-hour weeks, Patricia has been living like a millionaire on your credit. His face went white as he scanned the statements. These dates... She told me she was at local conferences, Chamber of Commerce meetings, networking events in Detroit. She was networking, all right, with Duncan Ross. I showed him the property records next. A $380,000 house in Las Vegas, purchased with a down payment that came directly from the joint savings account Patricia controlled. She emptied your savings account 3 weeks ago to buy this house. It's titled in her boyfriend's name, but the money came from the account you've been feeding with overtime, pay for the past 2 years. Preston wasn't just pale now. He looked like he might be sick. Boyfriend? Patricia doesn't have a... Dad, what are you talking about? I pulled out Marshall's phone, still logged into Patricia's Instagram account. Photo after photo of her with Duncan Ross. Poolside in Vegas, dancing at clubs in Miami, kissing under palm trees in Cancun. Duncan Ross, 34 years old, works in digital marketing. According to the children, he's been staying at your house when you work late shifts. They call him Uncle Duncan. Uncle Duncan? Preston's voice cracked. The kids know about this? Marshall has been carrying her secrets for months, Preston. She's been using our grandson as her accomplice, making him lie to you, telling him you'd have a heart attack if you learned the truth. Preston put his head in his hands. My God, how could I have been so blind? Because you trusted the woman you married. Because you're a good man who works hard and assumes other people have the same values. I placed my hand on his shoulder. This isn't your fault, son. But the kids, how long have they known? Too long. And it's been destroying them. Marshall has anxiety attacks from keeping secrets. Margaret has been having nightmares. Spencer barely speaks about his mother anymore. As if summoned by his name, Spencer appeared in the doorway. Dad? Why are you crying? Preston looked up with tears streaming down his face. Come here, buddy. Spencer climbed onto his father's lap, followed by Margaret and Marshall. All 4 of them huddled together while I showed Preston the rest of the evidence. The text messages where Patricia coached Marshall on lying, the photos of her new life in Vegas, the detailed plan she'd outlined for taking the children away permanently after filing for divorce. She's coming back in 8 days, I said quietly. Not to reconcile with you, but to execute the final phase of her plan. She's going to accuse you of being an unfit father, claim the children are unsafe here, and take them to Las Vegas, where she's already established residency. Can she do that legally? Not if we're prepared. I've already contacted a lawyer who specializes in cases like this. With the evidence we have, we can not only stop her from taking the children, but also press charges for fraud and attempted kidnapping. Marshall looked up at his father. Dad, are you going to divorce Mom? Preston was quiet for a long moment, holding all 3 of his children close. What do you kids want? This is your family too. You have a say in what happens. I want to stay with you and Grandpa, Spencer said immediately. Me too, Margaret added. I don't want to live with Uncle Duncan. Marshall, the oldest and most conflicted, took longer to answer. Dad, I love Mom. But I hate what she's been making me do. I hate lying to you. I hate being scared all the time that I'll say something wrong. You won't have to keep any more secrets, Preston promised. No matter what happens with your mother, that's over. What about Mom? Margaret asked. Is she going to be mad at us? I answered before Preston could. Your mother is going to be facing consequences for her choices. But those consequences aren't your fault, and they're not your responsibility to fix. That night, after the children went to bed, Preston and I sat in my garage with beers and the weight of everything that had been revealed. 40 years, Dad. I've been married to this woman for 10 years, and I never saw any of this coming. Manipulators are professionals, Preston. They're experts at making people doubt their own instincts. What kind of father doesn't notice his wife is destroying his children? The kind who's working so hard to provide for his family that he trusts his partner to handle everything else. That's not weakness, son. That's what good men do. Preston was quiet for a while. When she comes back, we'll be ready. All of us, together. The next 5 days were a masterclass in strategic preparation. If Patricia thought she was coming back to the same broken family she'd left behind, she was about to get the shock of her life. Mr. Vincent, the divorce attorney Roger had recommended, arrived at my house Thursday morning with a briefcase full of legal documents and a plan that would make a military strategist proud. With the evidence you've gathered, he told Preston and me, we can file for emergency custody, restraining orders, and criminal charges for fraud, Mrs. Parker won't know what hit her. I don't want her arrested in front of the children, Preston insisted. Whatever she's done, she's still their mother, Mr. Vincent nodded. Understandable. We can offer her a choice. Sign custody over voluntarily and make restitution, or face federal charges for wire fraud and attempted parental kidnapping. Sharon Wilson, Roger's sister from Child Protective Services, conducted her routine visit that afternoon. What she found was 3 children who had transformed completely in just 1 week. Marshall was teaching Spencer basic tools identification in the garage. Margaret was working on a wooden jewelry box she'd designed herself. All 3 were helping with dinner preparation, doing their homework without being asked, and most importantly, laughing. Mrs. Parker, Sharon told me privately, I've been doing this for 20 years. What I see here is a family that's healing. Those children were exhibiting classic signs of psychological trauma when I first met them. Now they're thriving. What was the trauma from? Parental alienation syndrome. Someone had systematically taught them not to trust their own instincts, not to form attachments, not to expect consistent love. It's a form of emotional abuse that can take years to reverse. And in Patricia's case, in 1 week you've given them what they've been missing their whole lives: structure, consistency, and unconditional love. They feel safe here. That evening, Dr. Maxwell arrived to conduct psychological evaluations of the children. What he discovered was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Marshall shows signs of chronic anxiety from being forced to carry adult secrets, he explained to Preston and me after the sessions. Margaret has abandonment issues that manifest as anger toward authority figures. Spencer has been so starved for attention that he'll do anything to avoid being bad and getting sent away. Can it be fixed? With therapy and stable family environment, absolutely. Children are remarkably resilient. But if they'd been removed from this stable environment and placed in an unstable situation with an emotionally unavailable mother and her boyfriend? Dr. Maxwell shook his head. The damage could have been permanent. Friday brought the final piece of evidence we needed. Patricia had been posting constantly on social media from Las Vegas, apparently forgetting that her son had access to her accounts. The photos told the complete story. Patricia and Duncan at expensive restaurants, shopping on Rodeo Drive, touring luxury condos with a real estate agent. One video showed Patricia drunk at a casino, laughing while she threw dice, with the caption, "Finally living my best life. No more boring Michigan winters or factory worker dinners. Vegas life Nasher upgrade. Complete factory worker dinners. My son worked his ass off at one of the most respected manufacturing plants in Detroit, and his wife was mocking him to the world." But the most damaging post was from yesterday. A photo of Patricia signing papers in what looked like a law office with the caption, "Making it official. New life, new state, new family structure. Some people just weren't meant for small-town thinking. Fresh start. No looking back." She's already filed for divorce in Nevada, Mr. Vincent confirmed after I showed him the screenshot, probably hoping to establish jurisdiction there before returning to collect the children. Can she do that? Not with the evidence we have. Michigan has jurisdiction over the children since they've lived here their whole lives. Her Nevada filing is meaningless without proper notification to Preston and established Nevada residency for the children. Saturday morning brought the call we'd been expecting. "Wesley, it's Patricia. I'm flying back tomorrow. Have the children ready by noon. I'm taking them home." Taking them where, exactly? Don't be difficult. Just have them packed and ready. "Patricia, there's been a development. Preston knows everything." Silence on the other end. Knows what? What have you been filling his head with? Credit cards, Las Vegas house, Duncan Ross. All of it. You meddling old bastard. Those are private family matters. $45,000 in fraud isn't a private family matter, it's a federal crime. See you tomorrow at noon, Patricia. Come alone. I hung up and looked at my assembled team. Preston, Mr. Vincent, Sharon from CPS, Roger with his surveillance equipment, and 3 children who finally understood they were worth protecting. She knows we know, I announced. Tomorrow she'll either surrender quietly or go down fighting. Marshall looked up from the engine part he was polishing. Grandpa? What if she tries to take us anyway? Preston answered before I could. Then she'll find out what happens when you threaten a Parker family. Spencer grinned. Are we really a Parker family, Dad? You always were, buddy. We just had to remember what that meant. Margaret set down her sandpaper. It means we stick together, right? I looked around my garage, my sanctuary that had become a classroom, a healing center, and now a command post for the most important battle of my life. It means we stick together, no matter what. Tomorrow, Patricia would walk into an ambush 40 years in the making. And this time, the family she'd tried to destroy would be ready. Sunday, 11:58 a.m. Preston and I sat in my living room with Mr. Vincent while Roger monitored from his car across the street. The children were safely at Sharon's house, per the plan. Every recording device was active, every document organized, every legal safeguard in place. At exactly noon, Patricia's black SUV pulled into my driveway. She looked different, tanned, confident, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. This wasn't the Patricia who'd left 2 weeks ago. This was someone who thought she'd already won. She walked through my front door without knocking, designer luggage in hand, sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. Wesley, where are my children? I told you to have them ready. Sit down, Patricia. We need to talk. I don't have time for your games, old man. Preston, why aren't you at work? And who is this? She noticed Mr. Vincent for the first time. Mrs. Parker, the lawyer stood. I'm Richard Vincent, representing your husband in divorce proceedings. Patricia's confidence flickered. Divorce proceedings? Preston, what is this nonsense? Preston stood slowly, and I watched my son transform. Gone was the exhausted, defeated man who'd been working himself to death. In his place was someone who'd found his backbone. It's not nonsense, Patricia. It's justice. I opened the first folder. Let's start with the credit cards. 3 accounts opened in Preston's name without his knowledge. $45,000 in charges for trips to Las Vegas, Miami, and Cancun. Patricia's face went white, but she recovered quickly. Those were business expenses, marketing conferences. You wouldn't understand. Business conferences? I pulled out her Instagram printouts. Is this you doing business at the Bellagio Casino? Or is this Duncan Ross helping with your social media marketing strategy? The photo showed her kissing Duncan at a poolside bar, both of them clearly drunk, with the caption, "Upgrade complete. You invaded my privacy. You can't use those." Actually, Mr. Vincent interjected, social media posts are public domain, and these show a pattern of deception and adultery that supports our case. Patricia turned to Preston. Honey, you don't understand. Duncan and I are building something that will benefit our whole family. I was going to surprise you. Surprise me? Preston's voice was deadly calm. Like you surprised me with the house you bought in Las Vegas, the one paid for with our savings account that you emptied without telling me? That house is an investment. Property values in Vegas are the house you've been living in with your boyfriend while telling our children that daddy works too much to care about them. Patricia's mask was cracking. The children don't know anything about... Marshall has been keeping your secrets for 8 months, Patricia. You turned our 12-year-old son into your accomplice. You made him lie to his father every day. I was protecting them from unnecessary stress. You were protecting yourself, I said, and destroying them in the process. Mr. Vincent opened his briefcase. Mrs. Parker, you have 2 options. Option 1, you sign these custody papers, agree to supervised visitation only, make full financial restitution, and walk away quietly. And option 2, criminal charges for wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted parental kidnapping across state lines. Federal crimes, Mrs. Parker. 3 to 7 years in prison. Patricia looked around the room like a trapped animal. You can't prove kidnapping. I'm their mother. I pulled out the final piece of evidence. Screenshots of her text messages to Duncan outlining their plan to take the children to Nevada without Preston's consent, including research on states with no extradition agreements for civil matters. Your own words, Patricia. Once we get them to Vegas, Preston will never see them again. Nevada doesn't cooperate with Michigan Family Court. The silence stretched like a taut wire. I could hear the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, Patricia's rapid breathing. Where are my children? She whispered. Safe, Preston said. Somewhere you can't manipulate them anymore. I want to see them. No, I said simply. You forfeited that right when you used them as weapons against their father. Patricia's composure finally shattered. This is all your fault. She pointed at me with shaking finger. You poisoned them against me. You turned my own husband against me. I didn't have to turn anyone against you, Patricia. I just showed them who you really are. I gave those children everything. Designer clothes, expensive activities, the best of everything. You gave them things, Preston said quietly. You never gave them love. You never gave them security. You never gave them a mother who put their needs before her own desires. Patricia grabbed the custody papers, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold them. If I sign these, I can still see my children? Supervised visitation, Mr. Vincent confirmed. 1 day per month, with a court-appointed supervisor present. And if I don't sign, then you'll see them through prison glass. She looked around my living room one last time, at the photos of Preston growing up, at the evidence of 40 years of real family life, at everything she'd tried to destroy and failed. You think you've won, she said to me, but you've just taken a mother away from her children. No, came a small voice from the doorway. You did that yourself. Spencer stood there, having snuck away from Sharon's house with Margaret and Marshall behind him. We choose Dad and Grandpa, Spencer said with the clarity that only children possess. We choose the family that chooses us back. Patricia signed the papers with tears of rage, not sorrow. As she walked out of my house for the last time, she took nothing but her suitcase and her broken dreams of easy money. The silence that followed was profound, not empty, but full of possibility. 3 months later, I was in my garage on a Saturday morning teaching Spencer how to properly torque a bolt when I heard laughter coming from the driveway, real laughter, the kind that comes from genuine joy, not the hollow sound of children trying to please adults. Marshall had just successfully started the Mustang for the first time since we'd rebuilt the engine together. Margaret was cheering from the passenger seat, and Preston stood behind them with the biggest grin I'd seen on his face in years. Grandpa, Grandpa, I did it, Marshall shouted over the engine's rumble. Listen to how smooth it runs. The engine purred like a contented cat. 40 years after I'd bought this car, it was finally whole again, just like my family. Preston had moved in with us permanently after the divorce was finalized. Not because he couldn't afford his own place. The settlement had awarded him full restitution of the stolen money, plus the house that Patricia had tried to steal, but because he wanted his children to grow up in a home where they felt truly wanted. Besides, he told me, this old house is big enough for all of us, and the kids need their grandfather. The psychological evaluations Dr. Maxwell conducted 3 months post-confrontation showed remarkable progress. Marshall's anxiety had virtually disappeared once he was freed from keeping secrets. Margaret had blossomed into a confident young artist, her wooden jewelry boxes now selling at the local farmer's market. Spencer, no longer desperate for attention, had discovered a natural talent for music and spent his afternoons practicing piano in the living room where Dorothy's old upright had sat silent for 15 years. Mr. Parker, Dr. Maxwell had told me at our last session, I've rarely seen such complete psychological recovery in children who suffered this level of manipulation. What you and Preston have created here isn't just a stable home. It's a healing environment. We'd established new family traditions. Sunday morning pancakes that the kids helped make. Wednesday evening garage time where everyone learned something new. Friday night movie marathons with popcorn and hot chocolate. Simple things that Patricia would have mocked as boring suburban life, but that gave these children the consistency they'd never had. Roger and Sharon had become regular fixtures too. Roger taught the kids basic electrical work and home security. Sharon, having seen them at their worst and best, became their unofficial aunt and fierce protector. The supervised visits with Patricia had lasted exactly 2 months before she stopped showing up. The last we heard, she and Duncan had moved to California, where she was trying to launch an influencer career that wasn't going well. Her social media posts had gone from confident declarations about her new life to increasingly desperate attempts to sell pyramid scheme products. Do you think Mom misses us? Margaret had asked one evening while we worked on a birdhouse together. I think your mom misses the idea of you, I'd answered carefully. But missing people and loving people are different things. People who truly love you don't use you as weapons or burden you with secrets. Are you sad that she doesn't come to see us anymore? I'm sad that you lost the mother you deserve to have. But I'm grateful every day that you found the family that will never let you down. The financial recovery had been swift. Preston's promotion to plant supervisor came with a substantial raise. The house Patricia had tried to claim was sold, with the proceeds going into college funds for the children. My modest pension was more than enough to cover our simple lifestyle, especially with Preston contributing to household expenses. But the real treasure was in moments like this morning. Marshall under the hood of the Mustang, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. Margaret sketching designs for a treehouse we'd build together this summer. Spencer playing a song he'd composed himself, filling the house with music again. "Dad," Preston said, finding me in the kitchen making coffee, "I never thanked you properly for what you did. You don't need to thank me for loving my family." "No, I mean what you really did. You saved us. All of us. If you hadn't fought back when Patricia tried to dump the kids here, if you hadn't documented everything, if you hadn't taught them what real love looks like," he shook his head, "we'd all be lost. I did what any grandfather would do." "No, Dad. You did what Wesley Parker does. You saw a broken system and you fixed it, just like you've been doing your whole life." That afternoon, as I watched my grandchildren play in the backyard, really play, not perform for social media or compete for attention, I thought about that phone call 3 months ago. Patricia had intended to use me as free babysitting while she abandoned her family permanently. Instead, she'd given me the greatest gift of my retirement, the chance to be the grandfather I'd always wanted to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Marshall. "Grandpa, can we work on the transmission next weekend? I want to understand how everything connects together." I smiled and typed back, "Everything connects through love, kiddo. The rest is just mechanics." From my workshop window, I could see the future, college graduations, weddings, grandchildren of my own to teach about tools and engines and the importance of keeping your word. Patricia had said I did nothing anymore. She'd never been more wrong about anything in her life.